The stars of the Tharkesh Dominion glowed cold and sharp, like silver blades across a black sea. And among them, one warrior stood above all, Veilrin, the unbroken blade. Her name was spoken with awe and fear. In the great halls of the Dominion, songs were sung of her victories. She had led armies that crushed whole worlds, silenced rebellions, and brought order to the wild edges of the galaxy. Her armor shone with a deep violet hue, etched with marks of every war she had survived. Her eyes burned gold, fierce and steady, reflecting the light of 1,000 dying suns. But behind that strength was silence. Veilrin lived for war because she knew nothing else. The Dominion had raised her since childhood to fight, to obey, to kill, to win. She had no family, no laughter, no rest. Only commands, only duty. When she was young, she believed glory would fill the emptiness inside her. But as the years passed, the victories began to taste like ash. After every battle, when the shouting ended and the dead lay still, she would remove her helmet and listen. The silence always came, the kind that made her wonder if she was truly alive or just a weapon pretending to be. On the morning before the next war, Veilrin stood alone in her quarters, looking at her reflection in the polished metal of her blade. Her scales caught the light, gleaming like glass, perfect and unbroken. Around her neck hung a small chain, an honor medal given for saving an emperor's son. She had earned it years ago. It meant nothing now. Her aide entered, bowing deeply. "General Veilrin, the High Council summons you. The Dominion declares war on a new species, the Terran Federation. Humans," she said quietly, testing the unfamiliar word. "Primitive, are they not?" "Not primitive, General. They are resilient. They have refused surrender." Veilrin gave a cold smile. "Then they will learn what defiance costs." Inside, though, something faint stirred, a curiosity she could not name. She had fought countless enemies, but never a species who fought for freedom rather than conquest. Later that day, the warship Talon of Dawn launched from orbit. The engines rumbled like thunder as the fleet spread its wings across space. Veilrin stood on the command deck, her posture proud, her expression carved from steel. Around her, soldiers moved with disciplined precision. They all looked up to her as if she were a goddess of war. But gods do not feel loneliness. When the fleet approached the blue-green planet called Elar Prime, she looked down through the viewing glass. The planet shimmered with oceans and forests, clouds swirling gently in its atmosphere. It was beautiful, too beautiful for war. "Prepare for descent," she ordered. The drop pods fired, streaking through the sky like comets. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the familiar hunger for battle. The ground trembled as her pod crashed into the soil. Dust filled the air, and the scent of burning metal stung her nose. She stepped out, blade in hand, scanning the battlefield. The humans were already there. Their armor was smaller, dull compared to her shining plates. Yet they stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, weapons raised. They were not retreating. Veilrin watched them for a moment. There was no fear in their eyes, only fire. The first clash came like thunder. Energy blades struck against ballistic rounds. The sound was deafening. She moved through the chaos like lightning, precise, powerful, unstoppable. No human could match her speed or strength. Bodies fell, cries echoed, and still she advanced. For hours, the battle raged. The sky burned orange, filled with smoke and fire. She felt the thrill of combat, but underneath it, a strange unease. The humans fought not out of obedience, but something deeper. Even when wounded, they crawled forward, shielding one another, refusing to yield. As night fell, Veilrin stood on a hill of rubble, victorious yet strangely hollow. Her soldiers cheered her name, but her eyes searched the battlefield. There, among the wreckage, she saw a single human soldier still standing, weapon in hand, defying her with quiet fury. He was small, fragile compared to her towering form, but something in his gaze struck her harder than any weapon ever had. He did not see a monster, he saw a challenger, and for the first time in her life, Veilrin felt her heart stir. Not with pride, but with something far more dangerous. Curiosity, the kind that begins the end of everything you thought you knew. The battlefield of Elar Prime lay silent now. The sun, dim and red through the haze, painted the ruins in a sickly light. Smoke curled from burning machines and the air smelled of iron and ash. The cries had stopped. Only the wind remained, whispering through broken armor and shattered walls. Veilrin stood among the wreckage, her armor scorched, her blade stained with victory. Around her, Her soldiers gathered the wounded, their voices sharp and quick. It was supposed to be another conquest, a quick and glorious win for the Tharkesh Dominion. But this battle had felt different. She had fought humans before, but never like this. These Terrans had not begged for mercy. They had not run. They had fought with something raw, something fierce. Even when death stared them in the eyes, they had refused to fall. She turned toward a field of broken ground. Her sharp senses caught movement among the smoke. Slowly, she walked forward, her heavy boots crunching against shattered stone. A single human stood there, alone. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with dust and blood. His weapon trembled slightly in his hands, but he didn't lower it. He was young, by human years, perhaps barely 30, yet in his eyes was the fire of someone who had lived through too many wars already. Valerin's shadow fell over him like a mountain. She spoke, her voice cold but calm. "Lay down your weapon, human. You have lost." He looked up at her, breath ragged. Then, to her surprise, he smiled faintly. "Maybe," he said, voice hoarse, "but I'm still standing." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Foolish courage. Maybe," he said again. "But it's mine." She should have struck him down. That was the rule of war. But something in his tone, something honest, almost peaceful, stopped her. No fear, no hatred, just a quiet resolve. "What drives you to fight when defeat is certain?" she asked. He coughed, blood at his lips, but still managed to speak. "Because this world, it's ours. Because if we don't fight for it, who will?" Valerin tilted her head. His words echoed in her chest like distant thunder. For the Tharkesh, war was duty. For him it was love. Love for his people, his home, his sky. She had never understood such a thing. Then the ground beneath them shook violently. Both looked up. The sky burned as massive ships descended. Dominion reinforcements. The battle was about to begin again. Valerin glanced back at the human. He was too weak to stand, yet he still raised his weapon, ready to fight until his last breath. She felt a strange ache inside her chest. "You cannot win this," she said quietly. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I can make it cost you something." And then the heavens split. An explosion tore through the valley. Fire swallowed everything. The shockwave threw her backward, her armor cracking as she slammed into the ground. She tried to rise, but the air burned thick with smoke and dust. Through the haze, she saw the human fall, disappearing beneath a cloud of debris. When the firestorm ended, the battlefield was gone. The sky was gray. Silence fell once more. Valerin's vision blurred. She tried to call out, but only a low growl escaped her throat. Pain crawled up her side. Her armor was shattered. Her ship, the Talon of Dawn, was a broken skeleton half buried in the dirt. She stumbled toward the wreckage, dragging herself forward on trembling legs. The war was over, at least here. Both sides had destroyed each other. The Dominion fleet had fallen from the sky. The humans, too, were gone. Only ruin remained. She collapsed beside a shattered wall, breathing heavily. Her body ached, but worse than that was the emptiness pressing at her heart. Then, movement. She turned her head sharply. There, crawling out from beneath twisted metal, was the same human. His uniform was burnt, his arm bleeding, but his eyes still burned with that same defiant fire. He looked at her for a long moment, neither of them speaking. Two enemies, both broken, both alive when they shouldn't be. Finally, he said weakly, "Guess neither of us won, huh?" Valerin let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Perhaps we both lost." The human sank to the ground beside her, exhausted. Maybe that's better. For a long time they sat in silence, two survivors of a war that had taken everything. Around them the fires dimmed, and the stars began to peek through the smoke-filled sky. Valerin looked at him again. He was fragile, wounded, insignificant by her people's standards, and yet somehow he had endured the same storm she had. For the first time in her life, she saw a human not as prey, not as a target, but as someone strong enough to stand beside her. And in that moment, something deep within her heart began to change, quietly but unmistakably. Valerin woke to the cold hum of a medbay. The sterile light reflected off her scales, highlighting the cuts and bruises from the battlefield. Every movement sent waves of pain through her body, but she forced herself to sit up. Around her, the remnants of her ship's interior were twisted metal and wires, a testament to the destruction that had befallen the Talon of Dawn. And across the room, bound to a chair, was the human. He sat upright despite the restraints, his chest rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. His arm was bandaged hastily and his armor was scorched, but his eyes, those stubborn, unbroken eyes, met hers. "You're alive," he said, a faint smirk on his lips. "I was starting to think you wouldn't make it." Valerin's lips pressed into a thin line. "I always survive," she said. Her voice, hoarse from the battle, carried an edge of pride and pain. "You humans are strange," he muttered, shifting slightly against the restraints. "Even when death comes, you don't give up." She studied him for a long moment. He was nothing by Dominion standards. Weak, fragile, a tiny creature in comparison to her massive frame. But something about him made her pause. She had met thousands of warriors in her lifetime. Some stronger, some faster, some cleverer. Yet none had fought with the kind of determination she saw in him. Not for power, not for glory, but for something she could not name. "Why did you fight?" she asked finally, her voice softer now. "When it was clear you could not win?" He glanced at her and the smirk faded, replaced by a seriousness that made her chest tighten. "Because surrender isn't an option when the people you care about are at stake. Because if I run, who protects them?" Valerin's mind lingered on his words. For the Tharkesh, loyalty was to the Dominion, to command, to duty. Personal feelings were a weakness. But this human, he had fought for love, for life, not orders. "Interesting," she said quietly. "You think you're interesting too, don't you?" He teased lightly, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. She tilted her head. "I am not your equal, human. I am Valerin, the unbroken blade. You are small, weak, mortal." He laughed softly, a sound that made her ears twitch. "Maybe I am," he said, "but I stand beside you now, and that makes me stronger than you think." Valerin felt an unfamiliar sensation, a mixture of curiosity and something warmer. She had fought beside countless allies before, but none had moved her like this. There was a strange comfort in having him near, a feeling that whispered that she was no longer alone, even in this ruined world. Days passed. The medbay became their refuge. She learned to tolerate his presence, then began to appreciate it. He cleaned wounds, scavenged supplies, and even managed to fix some of the ship's broken systems. In return, she showed him how to move silently, how to handle alien weapons, and how to survive in a world that had already tried to kill them both. At night, when silence fell over the shattered vessel, they would talk, not about war, not about duty, but about the stars, their homes, and the strange emptiness that life could sometimes bring. Valerin discovered that humans laughed in ways that could make even the coldest warrior smile. She found herself sharing thoughts she had never spoken aloud, memories of battles, of victories, of the loneliness that clung to her like a shadow. And Elias, her human, listened. Not with judgment, not with fear, but with understanding. One evening, as they watched the distant glimmer of alien suns through a cracked viewport, Valerin asked softly, "Do you ever feel afraid?" He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "Of course, but fear doesn't stop me. It tells me I'm alive, and I fight because it matters. Isn't that what makes life worth living?" She stared at him silent. The answer echoed in her chest louder than any battle cry. For the first time, Valerin realized that survival was not enough. Victory was not enough. Strength alone could not fill the emptiness she carried. There was something more, something fragile, yet powerful, something she could learn from this human. And for the first time in centuries, she wondered what it would feel like to stand beside someone, not just as a commander, but as an equal. As the stars moved slowly across the cracked sky outside, two warriors, one alien, one human, sat together in silence. The war outside had ended, but a new battle was beginning inside Valerin's heart. It was a battle she had never expected, a battle that would teach her that sometimes strength is not measured by power but by the courage to trust another being, and the courage to allow someone to stand beside you. The ruins of Elar Prime still smoldered under a dark sky, but danger was far from over. Raiders, neither Dominion nor human, descended from the clouds like vultures seeking to claim what remained of the battlefield. The two survivors, Valerin and Elias, stood together, battered, exhausted, and yet unbroken. Valerin's massive frame blocked the wind as she scanned the horizon. Her golden eyes narrowed. "They are fast but untrained," she muttered, her voice carrying the edge of authority she had never lost. "We can survive this if we fight as one." Elias adjusted his broken armor, one arm bleeding, but his expression remained determined. As one? He asked with a weak smile. You mean me and you? She gave him a look that could shatter stone. Do not test me, human. Survive first, talk later. The first raider appeared like a shadow against the firelit ruins. Valorin's blade sang as she moved forward, faster than any human could track. She cut through the enemy with lethal precision, leaving no room for hesitation. Every swing was controlled, exact, an art perfected over decades. But then another raider struck from the side. Elias fired his weapon, clumsy but effective. The bullet found its mark, dropping the attacker. Valorin's eyes flicked toward him. He was small, fragile, and far from perfect, but he was relentless. Every time she moved, he moved too, covering angles she could not. Every time she faltered, he was there. They became a dance of fire and steel. She fought with power. He fought with heart. She moved like lightning. He moved like the wind, unpredictable, unstoppable. A raider leapt at Elias from behind. Valorin's reflexes were faster than thought. She swung her blade, deflecting the blow, and caught the human as he stumbled. He looked up at her, breathing hard. Thanks, he muttered, a hint of a grin breaking through his fatigue. Her chest tightened, a strange warmth spreading through her. She had never needed anyone, never trusted anyone, but here, in the middle of chaos, she realized that his strength was different from hers. It was in his courage, in his refusal to fall, in the fire that refused to die. Hours passed. The battlefield grew darker, lit only by fire and the glow of alien weapons. The raiders, realizing the survivors were formidable, began to retreat. Valorin's chest heaved, sweat and ash mixing on her scales. Elias sank to one knee, rifle trembling in his hands, yet his eyes still burned with the same stubborn light. She approached him, towering, massive, but for the first time, not as a weapon, not as a conqueror, but as someone who had learned to see another being as equal. You fight recklessly, she said quietly. Maybe, he admitted, but I'm still here. Aren't I? Valorin studied him, her heart, a part of her she had never named, stirring. You are stronger than I expected, human, perhaps. You are not weaker at all. Elias looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Not weaker? No, she said. You fight with something my people do not understand. You fight with heart. They stood together amid the wreckage, smoke curling around them like ghosts of the fallen. Valorin's massive blade rested at her side. Elias's rifle was slung loosely over his shoulder. Both were exhausted, battered, and yet alive. Together. For a long moment, they simply breathed, feeling the shared heartbeat of survival. She realized that survival had a new meaning now. Not about being unbroken, but about standing beside someone who refused to leave your side. You saved me, she said softly, almost a whisper. No, he replied, shaking his head, blood on his lips. You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the chance. Valorin's golden eyes softened. She had never spoken like this before. Never admitted that someone else's presence mattered. But here in the middle of fire and ruin, she felt it. The strength of a human beside her was something no weapon could match, something no battle could teach. The wind carried the distant sound of raiders fleeing. The battlefield was quiet, but Valorin and Elias did not move. They had found, in the middle of war and chaos, a strange connection that neither of them had expected. As night fell and the stars began to peek through smoke-filled skies, Valorin realized something she could not deny. She no longer needed to be alone. The warrior who had conquered worlds could now stand beside another without fear, not just of death, but of feeling, and for the first time in centuries, she felt something she had never felt before. Hope. The horizon burned with light. Far above the ruined plains of Alar Prime, the familiar silhouettes of Dominion cruisers appeared, cutting through the sky like massive predators. Valorin's chest tightened. The rescue fleet had come, but not to save her, not truly. They had come to reclaim their weapon, and any human standing beside her was an enemy. Elias rose slowly beside her, his rifle cradled in his arms. He was bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, yet the stubborn fire in his eyes remained unbroken. We're not running this time, he said quietly, meeting her gaze. Valorin's fingers brushed the hilt of her blade. Then we fight, she said, her voice low, heavy with authority and unshaken resolve. The cruisers opened fire, energy beams slicing the sky. Smoke and debris rained down, turning the battlefield into a storm of chaos. Her soldiers were long gone, either dead or scattered. Now it was only the two of them, an alien warrior and a human, against the might of the Dominion. Fall back. A voice boomed through the comms, one of her commanders. The human must be eliminated. Do not fail. Valrin's golden eyes narrowed. She turned toward the speaker, feeling something she had never felt before. Defiance. Her hand rose and her blade hummed with power. He is my equal, she said, voice ringing clear across the battlefield. He saved me. You will not touch him. The comm fell silent. Shock rippled through the fleet. Some soldiers hesitated. Some tightened their grips on weapons. But the commander's voice came again, sharp and full of fury. You betray the Dominion, Valrin. He is a lesser creature. Kill him or you die. Valrin's chest burned, not with anger, not with fear, but with a resolve that had grown over weeks of surviving together. She had learned something from this human, something her people could never teach: courage, loyalty, and the quiet strength of heart. She stepped forward. I do not kill those who fight for what they believe in, she said. Not for power, not for glory, not for your dominion. If you strike him, you strike me first. The commander's response was immediate. A squad of elite soldiers charging toward her, blades drawn. She met them, her massive frame moving with lethal grace. Energy blades clashed against her own. Sparks flew. Every strike tested her body, but she fought with more than just skill. She fought with conviction, with the knowledge that this human beside her had earned the right to stand in her presence. Elias moved with surprising precision. He was small, but every shot he fired found its mark, slowing the enemy, giving her moments to counter. He stumbled, faltered, but never fell. And when a soldier lunged at him from the side, Valrin's blade struck with deadly force, cutting the attacker down before he could touch the human. The battle raged. The fleet above unleashed volleys of fire. Yet she moved through the chaos like a storm. She blocked, struck, and defended, all while keeping Elias safe. And all the while she realized something she had never known. This fight was not for conquest. It was for trust, for honor, for the right to choose her own path. Finally, the commander descended, personally challenging her. His armor gleamed, his blade raised high. You will obey, he shouted, rage boiling in his voice. Valrin stepped forward, towering over him. I obey only what is right, she said, her voice resonant and calm. Her blade glowed fiercely, reflecting the fire and destruction around them. If you harm him, you die. The commander attacked, fast and precise. Valrin met him strike for strike, her power unmatched yet tempered by the need to protect. Sparks flew. The ground trembled. The air was thick with heat, metal, and tension. Every movement carried the weight of her choices, the consequences of standing against her people. And when the final blow landed, it was Valrin who stood victorious. The commander fell, defeated, his arrogance broken. The fleet hesitated, the soldiers looking between their fallen leader and their unyielding general. Valrin turned to Elias, who had watched everything, trembling but alive. You are still standing, she said, a rare softness in her voice. He looked up, a faint smile appearing despite exhaustion. Because you stood with me, he replied. For the first time, Valrin realized that she did not need to be unbroken alone. Strength was not just her own, it could be shared. Courage was not just hers, it could inspire another. And love. Perhaps even she could learn what it meant. As the smoke cleared and the fleet retreated, the battlefield quieted. 2 survivors remained, an alien warrior and a human. They had faced the impossible together, and both had emerged not only alive but changed. The war outside had ended, but something far greater had begun, something that would forever alter the heart of the unbroken blade. The aftermath of the battle left a silence heavier than any war cry. Valrin stood on the broken hill overlooking the ruins of Elar Prime, her massive form silhouetted against the dim glow of a dying sun. Elias was beside her, wounded but steady, leaning on his rifle like a staff, his gaze fixed on her. The Dominion fleet had retreated, their pride wounded, but their message was clear. She had betrayed them. And yet Valrin did not care. For the first time, she considered not duty or orders, but choice. And that choice was standing beside a human. This human against the entire galaxy if needed. The commander, her former superior, had survived the clash. Now he approached, flanked by elite guards, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Valrin, you will kneel and surrender him. He is an enemy, and you know it. Valrin's golden eyes blazed. She planted her massive boots firmly on the ground. raising her cracked blade. "He is not your enemy. He is my equal, and I will not allow you to harm him." The soldiers shifted nervously. Some hesitated. Some tightened grips on their weapons. But the commander's voice boomed, full of rage. "Traitor! You dare defy the Dominion?" Violrin's chest swelled with a strange calm. She had been trained to follow orders, to conquer, to destroy. But this time she would not. This time her loyalty was not to a fleet, a title, or a distant empire. Her loyalty belonged to someone who had fought beside her, not out of fear, not for power, but for honor, courage, and heart. The first soldier lunged. Velrin moved faster than the eye could follow, deflecting the strike with her blade and spinning, her momentum knocking two more attackers off balance. Sparks flew, fire and steel colliding in a deadly dance. Elias fired behind her, unerring shots that slowed the enemy advance, buying her precious moments. One soldier broke through the line, swinging a blade toward Elias. Velrin intercepted, her massive hand gripping the smaller human's shoulder, pulling him aside just in time. "I do not allow you to die," she growled, fury and care entwined. Elias looked up at her, his chest rising and falling, blood on his lips, exhaustion in his limbs, and awe in his eyes. "I thought you were the one I had to protect," he said weakly. "You protect me too," Velrin replied, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Together we are stronger than they ever imagined." The commander advanced, his own blade humming with lethal energy. Velrin faced him, a wall of silver and violet steel. The two clashed, and the sound echoed across the empty battlefield like a storm. Every strike she delivered carried the weight of her decision. The choice to defy her empire and embrace a bond that went beyond strength. She could feel the anger, the disbelief, the expectation of obedience pressing down on her. But alongside it was something new, a strange certainty. She would not betray Elias. She would not betray herself. Hours, or was it minutes, passed in a blur of sparks, sweat, and pain. When the final blow landed, the commander collapsed, defeated, his pride shattered. The remaining soldiers froze, looking between him and the massive alien general who had chosen something other than blind loyalty. Velrin's chest heaved. Her blade was scorched and nicked, but she stood tall, unbroken, not because of power alone, but because she had made a choice. She looked at Elias, who had survived every moment beside her, and realized that equality was not in size or strength, but in courage, in heart, in the willingness to face the impossible together. "You are alive," Elias said, shaking but smiling faintly, "because you chose to stand with me." Velrin's golden eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel what she had always denied. Pride, yes, but also gratitude, and something warmer, something that felt like hope. "We survive because we stand together," she said. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the battlefield in gold and red. Smoke curled like ghostly fingers, and the air smelled of metal and fire. For a long moment, Velrin and Elias simply stood side by side, two warriors who had faced the impossible, and emerged not just alive, but changed. She had once believed that no one could match her, no one could equal her. And yet here he was, a fragile, mortal human whose heart was stronger than any blade she had ever wielded. The choice she had made was clear. She would not return to the Dominion. She would not bend to orders. She had chosen honor, courage, and humanity over obedience. And in that choice, Velrin realized she had found something far greater than victory. She had found a reason to fight, not for glory, not for power, but for connection, trust, and the quiet strength of standing beside someone who mattered. The war outside had ended. The real battle, the battle for heart, loyalty, and choice, had just begun. The war was over. The Dominion fleet had retreated, leaving Elar Prime scarred but quiet. Velrin and Elias stood together on the top of a crumbled hill, overlooking the ruins. Smoke rose from broken buildings. Ash floated on the wind, and the distant rivers glimmered under the fading sunlight. It was a world almost destroyed, yet it held a strange, fragile beauty. Velrin's massive frame towered beside Elias, her armor battered, her blade nicked and scorched. He looked up at her, tired, bloodied, but still alive. And in his eyes she saw something she had never expected. Understanding, respect, and unwavering trust. For centuries, Velrin had thought strength meant conquering, winning, surviving alone. She had led armies, defeated monsters, and broken worlds beneath her blade. But all those victories had felt empty. Until now, do you ever get used to it? Elias asked quietly, breaking the silence. The quiet after a battle? The way everything feels, small? Valrin tilted her head, thinking. No, she admitted softly. I never have. I used to think silence was weakness. Now I wonder if it is a chance to see clearly. Elias smiled faintly, leaning against a jagged piece of metal. Sometimes I think the quiet is scarier than the fight. But at least now I don't have to face it alone. Valrin's golden eyes softened. For the first time she saw him not as a fragile human. Not as someone she had to protect or command, but as her equal. Someone who had faced death beside her, fought for what he believed in and refused to bend to fear or power. Someone who had earned the right to stand with her. You have changed me, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I thought no one could match me. No one could stand beside me. But you. She paused, unsure how to put what she felt into words. You have shown me something different. Something stronger. Elias looked up at her, tired eyes shining. We're stronger together, he said simply. That's all it is. You don't have to be alone anymore. For the first time in her life, Valrin felt a peace that had nothing to do with power, rank, or victory. It was a quiet, steady warmth that filled her chest. She realized that true strength was not in being unbroken, but in choosing who you fight beside, who you trust, and who you allow to see your heart. They sat together as night fell, the stars of Alar Prime beginning to shine through the lingering smoke. The sky stretched endlessly, silver and blue, a reminder that there was still hope, still life beyond the ruins. Valrin reached out a clawed hand and rested it lightly on Elias's shoulder, not in command, but in connection. You have a human way of seeing the world, she said, one that I never understood. And now, I want to learn it. Elias laughed softly, a sound that made her chest ache in a way she had never known. Then I'll teach you, he said, one day at a time. The months that followed were not easy. The Dominion still called her a traitor, but Valrin no longer cared. She had found something more important than glory or obedience, trust, friendship, and the quiet power of standing beside someone who refuses to leave your side. They traveled to a distant, quiet world, far from war and politics. There they built a small home beneath the silver-leaved trees of a serene forest. Valrin trained, sparred, and hunted with Elias, who laughed at her alien strength and tried unsuccessfully to keep up. And every time he fell, she helped him rise, not because she was his superior, but because they were equals. At night they would sit beneath the stars, speaking of battles past, of planets seen, and of dreams they had never dared to share. And in those quiet hours, Valrin realized that peace was not the absence of war. It was having someone beside you who made every struggle worthwhile. One evening, as the two watched the sky fill with 1,000 stars, Valrin spoke softly. I once thought no one could equal me, that no one could understand or match my strength. Elias turned to her, his eyes reflecting the silver light above. And now? Valrin smiled, a rare, warm, and honest smile, unshaken by pride or arrogance. Now, she said, I know that equality is not in strength, not in conquest, not in power, but in heart. And in that heart I have found you. They sat side by side, two warriors from different worlds bound by trust, courage, and understanding. The galaxy around them was vast and full of danger, but under the endless sky, they had found something stronger than war. Each other. And in that moment, the unbroken blade finally understood what it meant to be truly whole.